couple of minutes, but it is 12:31 by my clock, so I think we're going to get started here, folks. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for today's webinar, which is You First, Dementia Training, focused on enhancing the long-term care sector. Before we get started, I would like to start today's webinar in a good way by recognizing that I am joining this webinar from the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. I'm really grateful to live, work, and learn on these shared lands. I also know that many of you are joining us from other territories across the province and perhaps even beyond, so I would invite you to use the chat function if you would like to acknowledge those territories. Today's Lunch and Learn webinar is being presented by the Alzheimer Society of B.C. We do have two presenters here today, Susan Prosser and Sarah Evanshen. And I did ask them right before the meeting how to pronounce their last names, and I think I literally just forgot in this 1 second. So they will reintroduce themselves and give you the correct pronunciation of their names. So I am just going to set the stage a little bit today for today's session. And I do want to let everyone know that this is not the full You First training session. Today, you are not going to come away from this 1-hour webinar fully trained with all of the knowledge and understanding about how to care and support for people living with dementia. This is a bit of a teaser. This is an information session so you can understand what the You First training program is and how you can get yourself and your colleagues registered after this session. And Sarah and Susan are going to tell you all about that process. But before I do hand it over to the speakers, I do want to go over a couple of housekeeping topics. So you'll notice as you joined that today's webinar is being recorded, and we will be able to share that recording as well as the PDF slide deck after the event is complete. We do welcome you to revisit that content yourself as well as to share it with your colleagues. We are going to ask that all participants keep their microphones on mute throughout the presentation just to minimize that background noise. And we also do invite your comments and your questions, and that's where we encourage you to use the chat function. And we will have a dedicated Q&A period at the end of the session. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Susan and Sarah. I'm actually going to turn my camera off, and we'll get started with the presentation.
Great. Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Laura. We're so pleased to be here today and to talk to you about the You First program. It's very exciting. Laura, you did a very good job of introducing us with our names. My name is Sarah Evanishin. I'm the Manager of Healthcare Provider Education Delivery at the Alzheimer Society of B.C. So my team is the team delivering the You First program, and we're very excited to do that. And joining me today is my colleague, Susan Prosser, who is the Provincial Coordinator Community of Practice. So Susan is part facilitator, part wrapping the learner in supports with our online learning center. Some of you may already be familiar and recognize Susan from some other trainings. She's been delivering healthcare provider education at the Society for a number of years now, so is a bit of a familiar face. Okay. So just really quick for those of you who might not be familiar with the Alzheimer Society of B.C. The Alzheimer Society of B.C. Connects people affected by dementia, whether that be personally, professionally, or both, to support services, education, and information at any stage of the dementia journey. I think it's important to note you don't have to have a diagnosis of dementia to be supported by the Alzheimer Society of B.C. Because I know there's a number of you today who support families. We have been delivering education to healthcare providers for over a decade now, and thanks to funding from the Ministry of Health, that education has now shifted to the You First training, which is what we're here to talk about today. So to get a sense of who's in this virtual space with us today, we just have a quick poll that should be launched on the screen shortly. If you don't see it though, you're welcome to use the chat box. So the question that we're asking is, how often do you provide professional care to someone living with dementia in long-term care? Is that daily, weekly, monthly, maybe occasionally, or never? And this just gives us a sense of your touch points with people living with dementia on a daily basis in your role. And I see that we have a lot of responses coming in for daily, so that's great. A lot of that frontline work, those frontline positions. And then we also have the other end of the spectrum, which is occasionally or never. And that's great because then it shows us that we're speaking to all sorts of roles here today. Um, Perfect. So we'll adjust accordingly. And I know that's super quick. We can usually get going. Okay, so I'm just going to end the poll. Sorry, I'm looking at the results. You can't see the results, but here you go. So a lot of the daily. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Okay. I'm just going to turn it over to Susan to set some context before we dig into the model a little bit more.
Thank you. I'm going to quickly share some stats with you about long term care. The first stat we have is that according to the Seniors Advocate Home and Long Term Care Report from 2022, we know that about 63% of long term care residents in BC had some form of dementia. And we also know that nearly 1 in 4 residents living in long term care in Canada may be receiving antipsychotic medications inappropriately. And this can be problematic. There are significant health risks, as you know, associated with the use of antipsychotic medications, including a higher likelihood of falls, strokes, fractures, and even death. And in BC, according to the Office of the Seniors Advocate, the 2024 stats, we see higher rates of antipsychotic use. So these stats indicate that about 29.5% of the residents in long term care in this province may be receiving antipsychotic medications inappropriately. So that's how we wanted to frame our conversation with you going forward as we start considering alternatives and alternative approaches. Efforts to improve safety and care quality require addressing the root cause of behaviors, and that means exploring the non pharmacological approaches. That is such a hard word for me, as a first line of defense when responding to behaviors before prescribing the antipsychotic. This approach requires a whole team working towards understanding a whole person. There's a lot going on, and behaviors can be very complex. Only then can we work towards understanding the behavior first and then subsequently developing strategies that address the root causes. Now, working towards understanding behavior is also the foundation of person centered care. And we are sharing with you today how the Alzheimer Society of BC is starting to provide you first education. And You First is a curriculum that's designed to empower an entire team in long term care to work towards person centered care and consider non pharmacological approaches in dementia care. So, the first thing as we jump in is we're going to share with you the You First messaging about person centered care, like how they define it. The You First curriculum begins with learners actually looking at this definition, discussing it, and considering it. The definition on this slide is taken from their participant workbook, and it's referred to throughout the workshop. We keep going back to it. It's the foundation of the curriculum, so we wanted to share that with you today. Students in the You First program learn that person centered care impacts a wide range of outcomes within long term care settings. They may already understand and appreciate that the resident benefits from this approach. They may get that. But what they may not have considered is that there is a strong positive influence of person centered care upon family members as well. And they also may not have considered how person centered care improves the experience of employees in the long term care setting. Education in person centered care combined with workplace supports that support staff to practice their skills and understanding can have far reaching impact. It can improve the quality of care and the quality of life for the resident. It can increase opportunities to build trust and collaboration with family care partners. And it can also reduce responsive behaviors. And finally, it can improve staff outcomes such as job satisfaction, confidence in providing care and in interacting with people living with dementia, and increased staff retention.
All right, thank you, Susan. So now that we're all aligned and on the same page of the value of person-centered care, I'm going to dig in a little bit more to talk about You First. So You First is a standardized person-centered training program that was originally developed by the Alzheimer Society of Ontario for the unregulated healthcare providers of people living with dementia. So that was the original target audience of the curriculum. And it has since expanded to 4 provinces, one of which, of course, includes BC. In October, the Ministry of Health provided funding to the Alzheimer Society of B.C. to deliver You First training to all frontline staff in a publicly funded long-term care home in BC until September 2027. So this includes all owned and operated sites and affiliate sites, and it covers the cost of what is normally an $80 registration fee and the workshop materials, which is a booklet and a You First wheel that you can move around. It does not include the cost, it does not include funding for staff backfill. So I want to make that clear because I know that that will be a question that many of you, I'm sure, have. Um, and because the training is designed for the unregulated care sector, for many of the health authorities, the care aides are a priority group. However, the training is available to all staff in a frontline role. So that also includes nurses, recreation staff, dietary, maintenance, front desk, and anyone who engages with residents in their daily lives. So hence our poll at the beginning, trying to gauge who's interacting with people and who's joining us today. So this helps to ensure that staff are using the same language when they all get the same training. It helps them to work in unison and set the same goals for a person-centered approach. This also means that they're understanding that care is present at every interaction in long-term care, whether that be at the reception desk, during a recreation program, or while having a meal in the dining room. So all of those touch points in the day are a part of providing good care and a quality of life in long-term care. So this training will be initially delivered by Alzheimer Society of B.C. facilitators, and then later on in 2026, we'll add a train the trainer component to the program where our master trainers will train staff within their organization who want to be trained to deliver You First training. And this is very similar to how some staff are trained on PIECES or GPA. And I just want to put out there more information on this and when it's available. Any updates regarding the program will all flow through the health authorities once those updates are available. So if you're wondering, when will I learn about this? How will I stay updated? All those communication channels are in place and we'll make sure that all those updates flow through accordingly. And I'll also speak a little bit more at the end over how you can get in touch with us if you have any questions. And I am keeping an eye on the chat box as well, so I'll try to pull them in as I can. Over to you, Susan.
Thanks. Um, as Sarah mentioned, You First is now available in British Columbia, but it was developed in Ontario and it's now in 4 provinces. So we've got Ontario, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and finally British Columbia. The You First model is built upon PIECES, and PIECES is actually the U for understanding. It is about half, slightly over half of the entire workshop. It's a strong focus of what participants will learn. And in the PIECES model, all behavior has meaning, and behavior is often communicating an unmet need or a problem. And so it could indicate a change in physical or intellectual or emotional health. Behavior can also indicate a change in the person's capabilities, could be a result of environmental triggers or social and cultural unmet needs. The wheel that you see on this slide is the You First model for thinking through and considering solutions when faced with that change in behavior. Learners are taught to use the wheel to guide their thought process and their actions when supporting a person living with dementia who has responsive behaviors. So quickly, we'll just go through the wheel. So understanding at the very top, so understanding that there may be many reasons why behavior changes occur in a person living with dementia. It's complex. Flag the behavior change and decide whether this behavior is a concern, whether it needs to be changed, and this also includes assessing for risk. Interact with both skill and an understanding of dementia or another cognitive impairment that might be present. Consider one's own communication style, body language, and tone of voice. We move on to reflect and report at the bottom of the wheel. So reflect and report on behaviors, but also on the potential meaning of that behavior. And learners are asked to consider how best to share information with their colleagues, when and with whom. Support the person and their care partner in everyday activities using a strengths-based approach. And finally, we have team. In this section, participants are asked how best to support teamwork. How can they work together to better support the resident? You First is offered in 3 ways. The first one there is in person. And yes, we do offer in person live workshops. They're full day workshops, 6 hours of content, 7 hours total, including the breaks. And the Alzheimer Society comes to you or somewhere close to you to offer this. And the second option we have is online via Zoom. Again, it's a full day, 6 hours plus breaks. There's a live facilitator with the cohort for the entire time. This is a highly interactive workshop over Zoom. It requires pre-registration and materials are sent to the participants ahead of time. And our final option is a 3-week e-learning course that's being launched on the Alzheimer Society of BC's learning management system. And this is fully online asynchronous learning, except that there is a facilitator here and check-ins, quizzes, and engagement with other students are facilitated and required.
Thanks, Susan. I just want to note to those with the questions in the chat box, we see those questions and they're excellent on the registration when we will get back to those very, very shortly because they're great questions. I just really quickly wanted to share this. I know it's a very busy table, lots of text, breaking all the rules for PowerPoint, but I think some of you might be wondering how it fits in, how you first fits in with some of the other training models, because we do have some other dementia training programs across the province right now. So I just wanted to speak to that really quick. I wanted to share that what UFirst has in common with all of these other training programs is that they're all person-centered and they're all linked to reduction in responsive behaviors. That is the goal with most of these programs. Similar to UFirst, the PIECES framework reminds us to consider and explore all parts of a person to understand their behavior. So the difference is that the target audience for PIECES training is the healthcare providers who have a leadership role on the team and a responsibility for clinical assessment and care planning. Whereas UFirst, again, because it's designed for more of that unregulated care sector, um, it's a little bit different in the levels. And so by having PIECES and UFirst together, this really helps to communicate and problem solve with all members of the care team. So the UFirst training does apply the PIECES framework in its approach to understanding the meaning behind a behavior. So the U in UFirst, as Susan had mentioned, is understanding, and we use the PIECES framework to understand the person. But it really has, UFirst has more of that focus on the team approach. So there's a lot of activities and discussions about how this fits and works with the team, rather than the more clinical focus. So GPA and dementiability, they're very similar in that they have, they focus on, again, that self-protection and expression of an unmet need. Um, they dive into pieces to varying levels. So maybe not as much, but there's some elements in there. And dementiability, I know, is focused a bit more on the independence and creating that supportive environment. But I just wanted to share these points because I wanted to emphasize that all of these trainings have so much value to offer. And whether you take one of them or if you've taken, let's say, GPA or PIECES and you're wondering if UFirst is for you, they really complement each other quite nicely. So I think it only helps to reinforce the concepts of person-centered care and that understanding that all behavior has meaning. So it's not that one is better than the other. They're just approaching the same thing in different ways, but they all have similar goals. One thing that we like about UFirst is that it does include elements from all of these trainings, and it focuses on ensuring that your entire staff are talking the same language.
I'm going to quickly talk about our online learning center, which is supplemental learning designed around UFirst. Our UFirst suite of learning includes access to the learning center And U-First registrants and graduates can access the curriculum there. And it's unique to BC. This is something that we're doing specially for our province. We want to ensure that all U-First learners are supported, that they have the opportunity to revisit the curriculum in different ways, continue to engage with their peers and with subject matter experts, and continue their learning journey. And if you're wanting your staff to be able to continue with this education, they can join the center, they can engage on their schedule at their convenience. The center includes access to primer materials, including 2 optional Dementia Foundation e-learning courses taken asynchronously to help learners understand the basics about dementia before they actually start their U-First training. U-First training doesn't go a lot into education about dementia. It assumes some knowledge. So these foundational courses can be really helpful, especially for new members of the team and new graduates. It also includes a series of 4 courses about culturally appropriate dementia care across different populations in British Columbia: Indigenous, South Asian, and Chinese. Bite-sized trainings such as live case study discussions or deep dives or refreshers on different parts of the U-First model will also be provided. And learners can engage with discussion forums. They can find other opportunities to engage with their peers and to facilitate their own online learning journey and professional development. The Learning Center will be launched in the next couple months, and U-First participants will be notified via email at or shortly after registration.
Right. Thanks, Susan. So I know the slide a few of you have been anxiously waiting for, but how do I access it? How do I learn about how to register for U-First? And we really wanted to sort of get through what's included in that so that you kind of know a little bit more about the program before we jump into how to access it. So we are pleased to have already started delivering U-First training workshop as of the end of February, starting with the island, Vancouver Island Health Authority and Vancouver Coastal Health Authorities. They had previously been delivering some U-First trainings in partnership with the Alzheimer Society of Ontario, so they already had those systems in place. And then between April and September, more seats will become available as we're continuing to build capacity and just ensuring everything, all those systems that are required to deliver a program are firmly in place. Then starting in October, the availability for the seats in U-First trainings will increase substantially. So we'll be fully in-person sessions. We'll have lots more online seats available. Now, I know that October feels a ways away. I recognize we're at about the end of March and that we're thinking about the other side of summer here, but it does come quickly. So I just really wanted to assure that everyone who is eligible will have the opportunity to take the training over the next 2.5 years until September 2027 that it's funded. So even if you don't see the seats coming up right now, there will be that opportunity to register at another time. Um, and how you register is really the information about upcoming sessions will be sent out through your health authorities. So that information will come to you when the seats are available. Again, just want to hold tight. It is coming. And all the registrations being done in Eventbrite. So you could either register yourself or you can register your team members. I'm just quickly going to look at the chat box because I saw there was a question there about, is there a reimbursement? No. So all of it's done. And as long as it's going through the long-term care home and through the staff there, then there's no reimbursement process. So trying to make it really easy and streamlined for everybody. I'm just going to pass it back to Susan, who's going to share with us a little bit of a case study to that teaser on U-First. Again, to what Laura said, we're not doing the whole U-First shebang today, but really trying to give you a sense of what that training could look like. And then we will have time to answer your questions in the Q&A there.
Thanks. So we are going to introduce a very short case study. I'm going to start with this great quote from A Guide to Quality Care from the perspectives of people living with dementia. It totally aligns with the goals of U-First really nicely. I'll not always be able to communicate my needs, and so I ask you to be a detective to help figure out what is troubling me. U-First is team training in detective work. It helps all the participants think through a behavior change, realize there's a behavior change, collect their observations in order to provide appropriate support. We have an example of some of this detective work in the case study on the next slide. It's very short and it's going to demonstrate how you first teaches the concept of flagging. Now, before we
Hi,
start the
everyone.
video, oh, thanks, Lara. Thanks. I just wanted to introduce that students in You First are going to work through many case studies in their training. And they are encouraged to actually take a real life situation from their workplace, something that has challenged them, and apply that case study throughout their You First experience. They may be required to independently think through the case study at times and apply their learning, and they will most likely work with others in small groups, whether it's online or in person. There's lots of engagement here to apply the You First concepts. So one of the first lessons is flagging. Flagging is the F in first. And so what we would be doing with students is say, hey, what are the behaviors that you observe here? Can you identify who, what, when, how often, and where? And so now we're getting ready to play this video for you. And at the end of the video, we're going to actually ask you to use the chat box to answer those questions: who, what, when, where, why, how often. So roll the video. Thanks so much.
I'd like you to meet Nick. Nick is a resident at a long-term care home. Recently, in the afternoons, Nick has started walking extensively. He can walk for up to an hour or an hour and a half. He takes small breaks in the living room area, but he sits on the chair looking sad and distressed. Staff come by and ask if they can help. Nick just looks at them, frowns, and walks away. We know something is wrong. Recently, Nick, on his walk, started telling us he sees animals. We don't see them. We think there's something wrong with his eyes. We know that he's bumping into furniture. Maybe he needs glasses. He's covered in bruises. Lately, Nick has started going into other residents' rooms, and this is a problem. He believes they are stealing from him. He picks up their items, usually books, and walks out. Once again, Nick is having problems because he bumped into the door, got another bruise, and then left. This is a serious problem for Nick, for the other residents, and for all of us working at the long-term care home. Hi, everyone. I'd
Okay,
like you to meet.
thank you. That's perfect. So please use the chat box. I'll throw out the questions. And if you were in a You First workshop, this is what we would be asking you. Who in this case study is involved with Nick? Who in this case study is involved with Nick? And who is affected by Nick's behavior? Great, thank you. The nurse and other residents, critical. Great, care staff and other residents. Fantastic. And it's really important to notice in this case study that if you work in the dining room or if you work as a care aide on Nick's floor or in Nick's unit, or perhaps you're the front desk receptionist in the common area where Nick sits down, your eyes are going to be needed to identify what's really going on and to provide proper flagging. The next question is, when does Nick's behavior occur? When is the problem time? Thank you. This is an afternoon event, right? There is no mention of it happening at any other time except for the afternoon. So really important information. And how would you describe the behavior? What's going on? Sadness and confusion, frustration, definitely, I would think the staff are probably feeling frustrated as well. Anxiety, maybe. Yeah, regular occurrence, anxiety, feeling lost and agitation. Great. Yes. This is not a happy moment for Nick, and we work with our participants because they need to be able to assess, well, do I need to be concerned about this behavior? Like, is this something I need to bring forward to a supervisor or chart or mark down, or how do I work with my team? So when we work with participants on this behavior, we also strongly encourage them to start going directly to facts. So we'd have them look at Nick's face and we'd say, yes, that might be a sad face. Yes, that might be a frustrated face. But actually, that is a frowning face and a grimacing face, which could also indicate pain. So we really deal with the nitty gritties with folks and we get them to go into the facts. Nick responds to 2 staff members in particular. There's no mention that it's all staff members. In the video, we only see 2. So do we need to consider specifically those interactions or with a broader group of people? He's walking, he's pacing, he's seeing animals. Is that a problem? Might not be. He doesn't seem to be troubled by that. And I'm the narrator here, and I indicate that we think that Nick needs glasses. And so we talk about that with the group. Well, could it be that Nick needs glasses? But what else could be going on? And we talk about that and kind of break it down. So you can see how we play around with concepts and just get folks to really take a deep dive into identifying and flagging what's going on with Nick. So thanks for joining me in that case study. And we're just going to share one more quote with you today. And a while back, we interviewed care aides across BC to ask them about the care they provide to people living with dementia. And this quote really resonated with us because we believe it's the essence of person-centered care. Now, this healthcare may or may not have been provided training in You First. However, she clearly appreciated the necessity of knowing her client before providing care and continuing to develop a relationship over time.
Great. So thank you, Susan, for that case study. Yeah, a really nice example of just sort of the tip of the iceberg of what we'd get into in You First. I know we're always rushing to try to solve the problem right away, but when we don't understand what we're trying to get to, it can be really hard to sort of jump to that sometimes. So thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We will, of course, use this time for questions, but before that runs away from us, I really just want to say how excited we are to offer this program to staff across the province. And for those of you who'll be joining us and taking part, I'm sure we'll see each other online at some points. So I saw that there are some questions coming in the chat box, so we can really get the Q&A rolling here and make sure that you get your questions asked. If you don't get your question asked or new questions pop up as soon as you leave, we have our email address on the screen there, youfirst@alzheimerbc.org. If you lose that, alzbc.org/youfirst, you can go to the website. Our email address is on there as well. So there are ways to reach us. So I'll pass it over to you, Laura, to kick us off with the Q&A.
Thank you, Sarah and Susan, for the presentation. And we did get a number of questions, some of which you answered as we went through the presentation. So I'm going to do my best to pick out the unanswered questions here. I did see one question come in, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'll make you answer it, is whether the training is only for people in Canada, or maybe I'll make it even more specific. Is it only for people in BC?
That's correct. So it is funding provided by the Ministry of Health for staff within long-term care in BC specifically. So you need to be actively working at a long-term care, publicly funded long-term care site at BC, or, if you don't live in BC yet, but you plan to move, like I said, we are funded until September 2027 to deliver this training. So, even if you move a year from now and then you settle into that position, then this training is still being offered at that point. So you'll have that opportunity if you are joining our beautiful province.
Great, thank you so much. And along a similar vein, I obviously see a few people here that are joining us from assisted living residences. And of course, there are people living with dementia in assisted living. Is there any consideration being given to expanding this training to include assisted living?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at this time, there isn't. The focus is just on long-term care, really prioritizing bringing down those rates of inappropriate use of antipsychotics. That's sort of a quality indicator, and one of the main goals behind providing person-centered care in long-term care. So for the assisted living sector, we do encourage you to take advantage of some of the other trainings that are out and about right now. So Safe Care BC has a course that we co-developed with them, building a strong foundation in dementia care. Or sorry, care and connections along the dementia journey, I believe. Sorry, got the title wrong. Got it right at the end there. Yeah, so Care and Connections is the one that you'd be looking for at Safe Care BC. That's an online course. So that would be a great one that I can recommend to those staff. The Alzheimer Society of B.C. also has a number of resources on our website that can help. Um, I do want to note our First Link Dementia Helpline. It's not just for family members. If staff have a question as well, our Dementia Helpline can be a good source of information. So for that sector, there are some other options, but You First is just not extended to that sector at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you for answering that. And maybe I'll ask my colleague Simran to put the link actually to that Karen Connections course in the chat, because I think that is going to help answer this additional question. I think Jeff was in here asking if registration is also free for the private for-profit long-term care sector. And maybe I'll massage that question a little bit, and maybe you can break that down into the publicly subsidized affiliate part of the long-term care sector versus the completely private pay part of the sector, because I think that maybe is the more relevant distinction.
Yeah, and thank you, Laura, for setting up that distinction. So the affiliate and the owned and operated sites, those are covered within the funding, and then the fully private for profit, the funding does not extend to that. So that would be another recommendation for the Care and Connection on the Dementia Journey course for that sector.
Yeah, so sometimes we have a little bit of confusion there. So if someone's an affiliate sector, private for profit or non-for-profit, they can be funded as part of this. But if it's privately paid, that would not be available. And that's where we would direct folks to the Safe Care BC course as well. And I honestly think that is all of the questions that I saw come in through the chat. But maybe I'll just ask one of my own, which is, having developed this training and having, obviously you're starting to roll it out. What do you think is the big benefit of this course as opposed to some of the others that are available? I know you went through kind of the technical breakdown, but maybe you can give us more of a personal gut reaction.
Yeah, so I think we spoke to this a bit briefly, but I really think it's a focus on the team approach, getting everybody to speak the same language. If I'm a nurse in long-term care, I'm seeing one side of things, but maybe I'm not seeing the person when they're in the hallway. That could be the maintenance staff that catches something that's important for me to know. Maybe it's those interactions in the dining room that's important for me to know. So having everybody on the same page with what you're looking for and enhancing that team communication, I think that just positions the care to extend beyond what a limited group of people can do. But maybe I'll turn it over to Susan too. That's sort of my impression, but I'd love to hear Susan's take as well over sort of what stands out for you.
Definitely the team approach and just realizing that no one person, no two-person, sometimes no three or four people can actually understand the behavior. It takes many eyes and many perspectives sometimes to get there. And also for me, I would have to say the stress on the understanding piece, not jumping to conclusions that behavior is just dementia and leaving out the really important factors such as, well, there's lots of environmental triggers that could be happening as well, the lights, the sounds, the loud noises. There could be physical pain, changes in routines. Like, it's quite complex when trying to understand behavior. And by the end of You First, I think our learners understand that complexity and realize that they need to think before they start introducing strategies to address responsive behavior.
Thank you for kind of expanding on that a little bit. And as you were doing that, another couple of questions came in actually as well. So one of them is about, how do we ensure that everybody within the care home is receiving the training, that it's not just, for example, care aides, but maybe also extends to the other unregulated care providers.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, the health authorities are prioritizing sort of the access points in different ways, which is completely fine because everybody will get it eventually. So I think starting out mostly with the staff who have the most interaction, so care aides for most, but in some sites when we're thinking of the in-person training, we might have the opportunity to go and deliver the training in the site, and then we can get sort of a mixed bag of people in that training. And that's one thing that we found is when we bring different roles together, the discussions are often enriched with the different perspectives, and then there's a greater learning that happens when we do that. So just having those conversations with the long-term care operators about the value in having those different roles there it can make a difference. So we're having lots of those conversations, really emphasizing that this can support those quality indicators that we're measuring, and the health authorities are, the same things that they measure each year. So they'll be monitoring that. We have our own evaluation that we're doing of the You First program because I see there's a question there about evaluating. And then Susan spoke a little bit to the online learning center. We don't want this to be sort of a one and done, and then 2 weeks later, you've forgotten what came out of the training. So by having more people take the training within the same site, at least spread over a period of time and speaking the same language, they can help to reinforce those concepts with one another. And then the online learning center will have some tools and additional training and supports to help reinforce those concepts. And we fully recognize that staff are very full, they have very limited time. And so we're mindful of that in the way that we develop these supports. We just want to ensure that the learning continues, right? This is a journey and it takes practice over time. So we're here to support in that. Maybe again, I'll turn it to Susan in case you have something you'd like to add there.
No, I think you covered it. Thank you so much, Sarah. And it really is our dream to be able to create some enthusiasm for adult learning and continuing education for this cohort, so that they always have opportunities to do their professional development and to keep practicing and keep learning.
Yeah. And sorry, I'll just quickly add on to that as well. We are a flexible group. If you have ideas of things that would be helpful for your long-term care home, that will help your staff and your teams, share it with us because then we can look at how we can embed that in over these next few years to build those supports. So that's, again, the email address is on the screen. Share your ideas with us. We'd love to hear from you over what's important.
And you know what? One more question came in. So there's a question coming in here about, whether consideration has been given to include this education as part of the curriculum for healthcare assistants, nurses, recreation staff, other allied health staff.
Yeah, so I think that decision's a bit beyond our focus and scope. That would be incredible. I think that we'd love to see dementia care training embedded in all school programs, all trainings. So I think for now, the focus is just sort of on what the funding is provided for, which is, this program for long-term care for the frontline staff, publicly funded sector. But if there's ever opportunity in future to expand it elsewhere, we'll be more than happy to look into that and have those conversations.
Mhm. I'd just like to add that in the last couple of You First workshops I did over Zoom, I had some amazing, a real diversity of people in those groups, and I had some amazing nurses there with us and some recreation therapists there with us as well. They were just fantastic.
Well, I think that's all of the questions that we've had come in. Maybe I'll just say thank you on behalf of the group for this wonderful presentation and for bringing this training to the sector. As I said at the beginning, we will be distributing the slides as well as the recording, and we do encourage you to share that within your teams so everyone understands how to get access to this training. And that I see that you've also included an email address there in case people have additional questions as well. So thanks everyone and have a great rest of your afternoon. And we'll just give a big